they're so close to you and stuff like that, or you're blinded and justify what they do or stuff like that, and you can't. It's really difficult, I think, for lots of people to remove themselves from the personal relationship. I think if you want to call it a gift, my gift was that I did go to prison, and I did spend time in there, and I spent time with hundreds, literally thousands of men, okay, that have all the different diversities over multiple years. And so you saw a lot of things. And then people always ask me, well, no, look at you lucked out. Look at your children are, and have done extremely well in relation to where their father was. And I said, well, part of that is probably like I know my own errors. I could guide them, so that they didn't make those errors. And then I saw what a lot of other individuals had done to themselves too. So they lived with a lot of stories. They had a lot of examples of see, if you do the negative part, this is where you're going. So, and I was fortunate enough that they said, hey, that's not where I'm going. And of course, I believe the girls were easier than the boys. Okay, but I was very fortunate.
And one of the things I know that you've told me in the past, that's a difference between back then in the late '60s, '70s, and now is a lot of people that were in jail were in for crimes of economics.
Economic crimes.
And a lot of people that are in jail now are
totally different.
for crimes like having to do with drugs.
It's almost all drugs now.
Or things that they've done while they were on drugs.
It's related to drugs. Yeah, when I went in, and we talk about that a lot because I've had partners that have done a lot of time. I mean, I did total of 7, but I have associates that 40 years. I have associates that are on their 46 years. 40. Ralph is in 46 years. So they've been there through the whole history inside. I was not inside through all the history. But yeah, when I started, it was basically everybody the majority of prisoners were economic prisoners like myself. I was an economic prisoner, and I won't go into all the stuff I did. Most people all know the organized stuff I did, and anything that was going to make money that I could steal or take it away or do whatever, I took care of. So you had different types of thieves. You had breaking and entry guys, you had armed robbery guys, you had people who heisted vehicles and stuff like that. So there was a whole bunch of... Today, it is all about the drugs for the vast majority. And their crimes are not necessarily planned out. They're opportunity crimes.
Yeah.
Okay? It's a quick... If they see a bicycle, they can steal. If they see a truck, they're going to do whatever because the only thing they're caring about is getting that fix and that connection for the drugs. I mean, I don't know, very few planning. Even bank robbers that you see, they run in, they, stick them up, give me and they get the dye all over. There's no planned kind of stuff. You don't see many, outside of on TV, you don't see many armored car robbers and stuff like that, sophisticated level. Few. There's few of that stuff going on in comparison to a day. Charlestown was considered the bank robbery capital of the world. God bless you guys. Because I know a lot of you are going to see this on TV, right? The town, okay? That's Stevie, God bless you, right? Who wrote the book, The Town, Stevie and Doherty. Charlestown was known for the center of bank robbers in the country and stuff like that. So it was a different time in a different era. Obviously still had drugs, but you didn't have it to the scale that you have today. You just didn't have it. And the opportunities were different. I mean, there was no, when I got out of high school, I wasn't worried about getting a job. I
Right.
was starting a family and everything else like that. I'm going to get married, which I did as a baby. I was 16, going to get married, do all that kind of stuff. And my
Well,
road wasn't where.
see, now this is the maturity of the brain piece
process,
that
right,
we're talking about,
right.
and that, that probably was a lead into that.
Oh, of course it was, because I wasn't ready. I didn't have the
Right.
skills. So I had to find a way to make a living. I wasn't ready to bring up kids. I was a baby, having babies. Now today you get out of high school, there is no, you ain't going to get a job. I mean, even with a high school diploma, you need to be going to college. So and those guys that drop out, and women, the guys and girls that drop out, they're in the street and they take care of their needs by the use of drugs, their fantasy by the use of drugs. You have more women. You never had the women criminals that back then as they are that you have today. So
Society's changed.
Changed. There's
It has.
all these things that
It
have
has.
changed, and if you're aware of it, it's one thing. And obviously we're aware of it because we're in the trenches all the time and really haven't got out of them. So that's why the broad base, as you talk about with me, it isn't that I jumped out of the trench and I went to a university and started telling people how to change things, and this is we stayed in there, we worked with that all the time, day in, day out.
But so you take all those factors in when you're talking about juveniles. Like I said, the short-sightedness, the fact that they shouldn't be able to turn down pre-sentence investigations, so that the court can really take into account all these factors prior to them doing sentencing, so that they can look at all these things. And really, the two Supreme Court rulings, the first one was Graham versus Florida, and the second one was Miller versus Alabama. The first one had to do with giving, saying that you couldn't have sentences of life without parole for people who were nonviolent criminals. And what the Supreme Court took into account was this whole thing that we were talking about, with the brain maturity, with the environmental factors, with the whole notion that you really, because you're at that age, you don't have the ability to escape your circumstance.
You're exactly right. Yeah.
So taking all those factors in, they were saying life without the opportunity for parole is cruel and unusual punishment.
Cruel and unusual.
Because you're taking somebody's whole life away. For the first one was having to do with nonviolence criminals, and the second one had to do with people who were involved with violence.
Violence, right.
And it was giving them the opportunity, and obviously the states have to do a certain amount to get in line with the Supreme Court rulings that are out there, because otherwise it creates lawsuits. People will be able to say, and they can right now.
Oh, yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the formative stage.
Oh, sure.
So does the state really want to pay for lawsuits against the Supreme Court ruling and have really ad hoc, because they're going to look at each one of these cases individually and they're going to make different decisions?
Exactly.
Or do we as a state want to take a look at all these factors together and come up with a plan to be able to almost incentivize for some of these people, to give them the opportunity to say that, there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
At a certain point, okay.
At a certain point.
At a certain point, yeah. Nobody's letting them out right away. And the interesting part about this is much like the ABI was. When we were dealing with the brain injury issues and stuff like that, lots of people didn't understand there had been a Supreme Court decision on the stuff that was affecting all the stuff that we were doing. So a lot of people were working in the dark. The difference with when you're dealing with the juvenile sentence, we know, okay, so you're well aware of what the Supreme Court has said, what the rule is, and if you're not following that rule, then anybody under the gun can file suits and challenge their situation to be reviewed and stuff like that. But one of the problems was we not only wanted written the legislation to get in line with Miller and the other case, but some people went further than.
Well, I think they looked at it and they said, look, this is based upon science, which what we're talking about is scientifically based.
Right.
And they were taking it to the next logical conclusion that people in lower criminal cases are going to be affected by this, and somebody's going to bring this to the Supreme Court.
Again.
And again, because it's based on the same logic,
exactly
they're going to look at people who are at lesser levels.
Right.
And here's the roadblock that they ran into. The bill passed the House.
Exactly, right.
Bipartisan,
By a huge
majority.
Huge
majority.
Right.
No questions asked,
No
none
questions,
whatsoever.
no.
And when it got to the Senate, they wanted to have a much larger debate on the whole issue. I certainly understand it from some people's perspective. Everybody looks at everything a little bit different. People from different parties look at things differently. I've spoken to some Republican senators because there was a list of about 20 amendments that were thrown on there at the last minute.
Oh, yeah.
And so what would happen is they would have to go through and they would have to vote on each amendment.
Right.
And one thing I've learned from lawmakers is they don't want to be stuck in a position where they have to go on record with something that's extremely sticky unless they see that, it's going to be something that's worthwhile, that's going to come to fruition. I know I spoke to a friend of mine who was on the Public Health Committee, and they were talking about the whole thing with assisted suicide. Which didn't make it out of the Public Health Committee.
Right.
Because they weren't going to have a vote on the General House floor on this, because that was a decision that leadership made.
Right.
So why would you want to stick your position out right here unless they're going to follow through on it? Because it's basically saying, okay, here's my record. This is what you're going to look at me on, and you're sticking me out on a limb, and you guys aren't even going to vote on this.
Right.
So some of these things, if you looked at them, and I did look through the whole bill, and I looked through all the amendments that were on there. Some of them made sense. I mean, some of them weren't, in question. Some of them brought up the whole issue about the death penalty,
Right.
which we've taken away in this state,
Right.
and it would have had people go back out and have to, vote their line on where they see like the death penalty.
Right.
Some of them had to do with circumstance. We've had the whole incident with Sandy Hook and Newtown.
Sandy Hook and Newtown.
And they were looking at if somebody who's and obviously Adam Lanza was not a teenager, he was older. If he had been brought to justice and not taken his own life, he would not have been in the juvenile system. He was 20. But it looks at like a Columbine type situation.
Yeah,
if somebody
exactly.
does that in a school, then would they get the death penalty still? And we've outlawed the death penalty, and so there are a lot of issues that went along with this. And I think what we wanted to do, obviously, and we broached the subject with Senator McKinney because he was the minority leader.
Right.
And really they're, along with the other senators, make the decision on what they want to do within this, was we wanted to have the discussion with it. Where are you in between? And the Supreme Court didn't outline everything that
Right.
we were talking about in the bill, and so we were trying to find out, okay, because really you're between two parties. And,
Oh,
and
exactly right.
and you want to find out, okay, well, if the Supreme Court's here and everybody's over here, where in between can we find some common
Common
ground
ground, obviously the common ground was.
in order to get this passed?
Get it passed. My sense is, obviously, I was looking for, I had talked with Yale, Yale was instrumental with a lot of stuff. I wanted a clean bill. I wanted to try to get a situation where, look, let's get what the Supreme Court has said to do. Let's get that through, and then let's deal with this other stuff later. Because we're only asking, basically we're asking, the Supreme Court is to give them the opportunity for review. Okay, so that at a certain point in time, whatever the years is, the state says 25, we're not talking tomorrow, we're not talking next year, we're talking after they've done some time, serious time, that now that individual has an opportunity to demonstrate or show that something's changed, that their brain is matured, that they're doing this. Well, others, of course, wanted to put in what I believe you have to put in is a stepping stone of how you evaluate that scientifically and all that stuff, which is needed. Which I look at my associate Ralph Ham, where he was at 17, where he is now. They're two different people. He is one of those individuals up in Massachusetts that is, he's nothing like what he was at 17, not even close. Now he's an educated man, college graduate, author, and of course, with him, I can show the steps of maturity over the years and stuff like that, which is what I use as a model that I think people kind of have to do that. Even myself, I've changed. Even, I have a whole list of individuals who are out that were not hubcap thieves, and some of them have had killings involved and stuff like that, who have changed. And some of them were a little bit older than the 17-year-olds, They say the brain isn't, it's somewhere around the 20s. I mean, that's,
Well, if you look at it from a societal point of view, and this everybody can relate to, all of a sudden, when you hit 25, 26 years old, your insurance rates for car insurance just seem to drop magically down.
And totally different, yeah, exactly.
And there's a reason for that.
There's a reason
That's
for
the
it.
brain maturity. That's the not taking the risks.
That's
It's understanding that long-term consequences
exactly
of things.
right. And that's exactly where it runs in that 26 to
22, 21 to 26, and it really depends on the person
on the
too.
person.
And that's
Some more mature,
it's not
slower than right, exactly.
Right, and what opportunities you've had, whether you've had the addictive past, which slows the progress, and
education, all those things factor into that stuff in where the individuals are, and that's a total package. Obviously, we know that affects how somebody changes, how they develop, and where they go, and that's kind of the business you and I are in,
Right.
is to getting. We deal with that part of the business, how you take a person, as you said, a step at a time to get to a certain goal, to get to a certain level, and stuff like that. And sometimes with our individuals dealing with ABI, we're kind of on a cycle. We go back and forth and everything. I deal with people that are come out of prison who've changed over the years, and they don't cycle the same.
Right.
Their steps have to be up and away. Otherwise, they're going to stay in the prison environment and in that situation. So I look at obviously multiple individuals, and it is almost a case at a time. It's because each individual is different, and each individual. But there are common there is common ground to all this stuff, and that's what we're talking about. That's what we're trying to find.
When you're talking with giving somebody the opportunity for parole, as you're saying, and somebody who has a life sentence, which is 60 years, you talking, it might be 20, 30 years in, and they have to do certain things in order to demonstrate that they're not a danger to society. I mean, getting educated is one. Showing some level of remorse or for your behavior, and there are other factors that go into it that the parole board has to take a look at. So it's not an automatic stamp that says, you hit 30 years, you're out. As I like to say, Charles Manson comes up for parole here
all the
still.
time.
Let me tell you, they don't let him out.
He ain't getting out. No, Charlie isn't going to hit the street.
No.
Exactly right.
He's also pretty crazy.
Absolutely. Okay, Charlie's not the kind of guy that they're not going to let out, and that's the kind of thing that some people didn't realize. I mean, no, there are individuals that are going to be locked up forever. They're going to die in institutions. Right. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can change. You can't change them or anything else like that. They're not. What's the word I want to use? Adaptable to be able to do change and stuff like that, and that's just the way it is. But they are a serious minority. There are very, very, very few.
I think they're and using the old term, the 3 strikes you're out. People who have that intent that they're never going to rehabilitate. I did take a look through the bill, and they were talking about there's some 80 people that are currently in the system right now that they have that level of classification for. Because that was actually one of the things that they brought up as an amendment was, if you have 3 strikes, then you wouldn't be eligible for parole. The difficulty would be that we're talking about there are people's offenses that happen before 18. So once you go past 18 years old, if you committed a crime again, you're in the adult system. It's not like we revert back and say, no. This is before you're 18. And so some of the amendments were a little bit on the ridiculous side because they were like, you would have to commit 3, extremely aggressive, violent crimes before you were 18. And it's like, I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, that's not possible. Why is this an amendment that needs to be in here? And those are some of the issues that I look at that we have with the bill. And it like I said, it passed on huge bipartisan support in the House, and it just didn't get called in the Senate. And then you have a time clock on these out years, as I call them, where it's a short session. The session's over, I believe it's on May 7th.
I know.
And whereas on a budget year or a biennial year, it'll go, I believe, all the way up to July 1st. Right. So these guys are all crammed for time, and as with anything, I think when you're dealing with the legislation, everything's a matter of timing.
Yeah.
And circumstance, too.
And that's where we are with the show, too.
Well,
okay,
because it just flies right by, doesn't it?
And we're going to be working on this year. This is a big issue. I hope that the people who listened in got a little bit of information on what we're doing and stuff like that. Again, I'm sorry that John wasn't able to make it today, and I hope I'm going to have him on another show, or you might even find this show after he's been on. But I want to thank all my audience. Thank Dominic. It looks like we're going to have a good season.
Yes.
Okay, we've got a lot of people on. Senator Maynard's coming on. I got Tim Bowles is on. Is going to be on with me. Rob
Rob Kane.
Okay, yeah, but friend of yours, he's gonna be on, so
Second
we are,
time.
yeah, we're gonna be across the aisle this year and everything else. So I wanna make sure you all tune in and stuff like that. Again, it was great to have Dominic on me here with me, and, you know, God bless you all. I will see you next week, okay? You take care, and they can run the street, and God bless.